We all get A's.
Okay, now share screen. Put it on there. Share. Please begin the presentation, ladies. Go right ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just start by introducing us. I am Jennifer May. We have Elizabeth Stiles, Katie Mullins, and Christina Parrish. We are Team Pfizer, and I believe Christina is going to start us off with the next slide to give a history of Pfizer.
So Pfizer was founded in 1849 by cousins Charles Pfizer and Charles Earhart. And Pfizer himself was a chemist, and his cousin Earhart was trained as a confectioner. It was originally started as Charles Pfizer and Company, and it was originally in Brooklyn, New York. It started as a fine chemicals business. Their future development was actually patterned after their first product, which became a very tasty anti-parasitic drug that tasted like toffee and was known as the drug Santonin.
Oh, God.
One of the early turning points for the company, as well as some other drug producers, was the American Civil War. This was the first industrial war, and it involved drug producers as much as weapons manufacturers. And this was because there was a sudden need for painkillers and anesthetics. And because of this, it provided a great opportunity to expand production for Pfizer and their competitor, Squibb. 19 years after Pfizer was founded, its revenues doubled, and the product line expanded beyond toffee-flavored anti-parasitic drugs. Pfizer's purpose is that their purpose is grounded on their commitment to fund programs that provide public benefit, advance medical care, and improve patient outcomes. They believe that everyone deserves to live a healthy life, and
We've lost your audio. Can you folks hear her?
No. Hey, Christina, we can't hear you.
She doesn't know it.
She can't hear us either. We'll text her.
Send her a chat.
Yeah, she may have internet problems.
Christina, can you hear us?
yes.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
we did not hear what you said. We saw your mouth working, but we couldn't hear anything.
Okay, so did y'all hear the purpose?
We can hear you now. I think we can read this slide. We'll move to the next slide.
Okay.
Go ahead, Christina.
So their vision is health for all. That's at the core of their purpose. So they accomplish this by innovating to bring therapies to patients that significantly improve their lives. Abell's model, as you all know, it's a three-dimensional tool that analyzes the scope of the operation of their business. So their unmet customer needs are to provide safe and effective medications, therapies, and vaccines that improve the overall quality of health. Their customer groups are, of course, all individuals. They cover all ages. They actually have hospitals and other care facilities, laboratories, retailers, pharmacies, government agencies, wholesalers, and distributors. And their distinctive competencies are IBM's Watsons to fuel their immuno-oncology research, gene therapy, cardiovascular research, mRNA technology, which we all know was behind the COVID-19 vaccine, internal medicine, rare disease research and development, inflammation and immunology, and hospitals.
Okay.
And Pfizer now is housed in, their headquarters are in New York, so not far where they originally started. Groton, Connecticut is the headquarters for their research and development division. They are home to 6 other research and development locations in the US, and the Ukraine is home to 1 facility. They have acquired over 41 companies, most recently in August of 2021, Trillium Therapeutics. They are responsible for some drugs that we may recognize more so as Zoloft, Lipitor, Viagra, Aricept, and Zithromax. And they are at the forefront of battling COVID-19 with the vaccine and its mRNA technology.
Very nice. Elizabeth?
All right. Here are some of the popular products you might recognize from Pfizer. These are some of the over-the-counter and prescription items Pfizer produces. Advil is very popular with over-the-counter, and some of the prescriptions such as Zoloft, Lipitor, Xanax have been popular in the prescription realm. This is a breakdown of the top product by revenue. This is for each therapeutic area. And in oncology, we have the Ibrance, which is a targeted therapy for breast cancer. In inflammation and immunology, Xeljanz is treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. In internal medicine, Eliquis is an anticoagulant, which lowers the risk of stroke or blood clot. Hospital sector, sulperazone is a combination antibiotic for bacterial infections. Vaccines, Prevnar 13 is an immunization for pneumococcal pneumonia. And then for rare diseases, Vyndaqel treats a certain type of heart failure.
Okay.
So these are the top products by revenue, and this is as of 2020. So the top product, as you can see, is the Prevnar vaccines, and then it goes down through each of the other products, several of which I just mentioned.
Well, is there anything noticeable here? It looks like 3 categories of drugs really dominate Pfizer's product mix, maybe reaching down to Xelnax, but, or how do you say, Xeljanz, but those top 3, Prevnar, Ibrance, and Eliquis, really seem to and they would indicate the areas where Pfizer concentrates more, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And these are projections for, this includes the revenues from 2020 that we just saw in the previous graph. And we've added in the 2021 projection for the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is just a visualization of how much revenue is coming to Pfizer with that COVID vaccine. Again, this is exactly the same graph as the previous slide, just adding in the COVID vaccine projections.
Okay.
So current products in the R&D pipeline as of November, there are 27 in phase 1, and these are the experimental medicines that are tested in clinical trials. Then they move to phase 2, and there's 29 currently in phase 2, and these are where they're doing trials for the effectiveness and figuring out the ideal dosage and delivery. In phase 3, there are also 29 products, and these are in trials with larger populations, and they're more focused on reviewing risks and benefits. 9 are currently in registration, and that just means that they have the applications filed with the regulatory authorities. So in total, in the R&D pipeline, there are 94 products, and that means if we started with, if we ended up with 94 in the entire pipeline and 9 are in registration, and that means approximately 10% make it through to registration.
That's what caught my attention too. Thanks for mentioning it.
So Pfizer has many patents and licenses, not just for pharmaceutical products and formulations, but also some manufacturing processes. It identifies the following patents as the most significant for sales and considering competitor product replacements that are coming up, such as generics. It's important that they identify which patents expire soon, because that challenges them to introduce new products and also to acknowledge which of their cash cows are going to be falling out of popularity in the coming years.
Right, it looks like they only have one that will go off patent in the US this year. That's good for Pfizer.
Yes.
So next we'll go over a quick financial profile for Pfizer for the last 2 years, just so that we can get a current financial state of the company. In 2020, Pfizer brought in 41.9 billion of revenues. It's down 10 billion from 2019, mainly due to a spinoff of its consumer healthcare product line business. It divested its consumer healthcare products Upjohn to become a leaner, more specialized business unit, so it could focus on its key core product lines for its long-term growth. It brings in a nice profit margin. In 2020, it was 7 billion. It's down in 2020 compared to 2019, but that's mainly due to COVID volumes. Everything shut down, and the patient visits in the US decreased.
Right.
Pfizer has a global presence in 121 countries. We can see the chart on the right. Revenue is primarily driven by the US, and we'll see a little bit more later on about the US. But sales outside of the US still account for a large part of the revenues, roughly 20.2 billion in 2020. A quick outlook for 2021 revenues. They're projected to double, just like we just saw with the COVID vaccine. So they were one of the first movers, so they really materialized off of that. A look at the revenues also in the chart at the bottom right. It includes a breakdown of its product line volumes. I primarily want to just point out the importance of oncology revenue volumes, but also the percent growth. So we will see further how oncology is just a major driver for Pfizer's future.
Okay, thank you. Good summary. This thing is not playing ball with me. I'm trying to make it work, and it's.
I think you just have to click the next slide.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Oh.
There it is. It's there.
So here's some charts to show the sales again. We can see the increase in 2021. It's just, which will provide an increased market share for Pfizer in the near term. Its operating margins at 47.4 in 2019 and 40.5 in 2020. The drop is strictly due to volumes. However, the 47% margins bring in a lot of money for its shareholders. Its ROE and ROI continue to be strong. While you can see that ROI and ROE also dropped in 2020, Pfizer has made some strategic R&D and partnership agreements during the pandemic, which will help the company to really bounce back quickly. Then the last look at the financial profile, we can see a slight increase in the long-term debt. Shareholder equity is projected to really skyrocket in 2021, mainly due to the COVID vaccine favorable outlook. Leverage held steady at around 37% over 2019 and 2020. We would say this is a reasonable number, as we can see that 2020 shows positive working capital of 9.1 billion. So it really has an upper hand on its debt. We can see that its liquidity position over in the chart on the left improved from 0.88% to 1.35% from 2019 to 2020 by paying off its short-term commercial obligations.
Yeah, the current ratio improved from just under 1% to 1.3%. And this is as Katie mentioned, this is a measure of liquidity, how easy it is to meet your current obligations. And while it was under pressure to repay 16 billion of current obligations, that was pressure. But today, the pressure isn't as bad. I don't know if you recall from your finance course, but we usually feel better if the current ratio is about 2. And so Pfizer has a little way to go to get its working capital position just a little bit more comfortable.
So just as a quick review, Pfizer is of course one of the first movers of the COVID vaccine. So we'll see a large increase in sales, returns, and market share. They have global sales spanning 121 countries, with the US being the largest, and oncology represents one of the largest growth markets. So overall, Pfizer sits in a favorable financial position with minimal risk.
Off we go to economies.
Okay, so here is a global view of real GDP growth. We focused on the US, China, India, Brazil, and the entire European Union. And this just shows the real GDP growth, and with the concept that as a country's economy grows, spending on goods and services will also grow.
This is a great map.
Thank you.
Where are which areas seem to be the most important for growth? India, perhaps 9.5%. Is that right?
Yes.
It's remarkable. Okay.
All right, here is a graph of the GDP-PPP, and it features the same countries again. Currently, China has the greatest GDP-PPP with the largest growth potential. You can see the green line, how it passes the US and the European Union, which those two countries have remained closely tied. But in 2017, China surpassed both, and it is projected to continue increasing at that exponential rate you see there in like a lighter version of green. And then all the areas show a dip in 2020. Of course, we attribute that to the COVID-19 pandemic. All right, so here's the GDP-PPP per capita, and this compares the economic productivity and standards of living between countries. The US has the largest per capita, indicating it's the wealthiest and consumes the most, which is not a surprise. China and India are the lowest, and they are not at a high price market. It's interesting though that China has the highest GDP, but one of the lowest per capita for GDP. It's tough to grow business in China and India. Low cost strategy can be used since its buying power is not as strong. Here's a feature for unemployment rate. China consistently has the low unemployment rate. US and Brazil, they vary, and it can be tied to political influences and social influences that are specific in those countries. There's a sharp increase in 2020 due to the pandemic. Unemployment went up. A lot of people lost jobs or had to stay home. And then the greater employment means that there's greater spending on goods such as pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
Here's a feature about the exchange rates. The top left is the US dollar to the euro. Then we move to the yuan to the US dollar, rupees to the US dollar, and reals to US dollar. And I want to point out that the top left graph is US dollar to euro, which is inverted compared to the other graph. And you know, buying pharmaceuticals between countries is impacted by these exchange rates. And an example would be in 2021, the US dollar will buy less yuan. So US buying from China is more expensive than China buying from the US.
Yeah, prior to that, it was the US dollar was buying more yuan, and then it reverted to that long-term trend over on the left of the chart. But right now, your point at the bottom is a very good one. US buying from China more expensive today than it was a year ago. And of course, you've heard in the news that the US buys a lot of its pharmaceutical components from China.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not so good. The politicians don't think it's so good. But that explains another reason why our prices are going up. Okay.
Well, speaking of that, inflation is currently high. I think we've all experienced that purchasing in the market. So the high inflation rates, like the one in Brazil, which is 7.7%, means that it costs more to buy goods today than it did like a year ago. Consumers spend more money per item when inflation is high versus spending more money to acquire more items when inflation is low. Here is the US real disposable income per capita. This is just specific to the United States. Personal disposable income per capita increases over time. There were significant spikes in 2020 and 21 around the time of pandemic stimulus payments. And the more disposable income means that people are going to spend more money on pharmaceuticals, or they may look at buying name brand versus generic when they have that extra income to do so. Linked to that is the US health expenditures per capita. This is also steadily increasing over time and has doubled from 2000 to 2015. And the gray areas that are shaded are times of recession. And this shows that even in those times of recession, health expenditures continue to increase, indicating that health expenses are a necessity and people are willing to continue paying for those even in times of hardship.
And supported by government payments.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a summary for the economies. The best opportunities to sell pharmaceuticals for the countries we looked at is greatest in the US and the European Union. China has the greatest GDP, but its GDP per capita is lower, so it's difficult to purchase pharmaceuticals like the consumers in the US and the European Union. Exchange rates impact the buying of pharmaceuticals between nations. Inflation rates hinder buying goods due to the expense. You know, we say that how far can you stretch a dollar? Dollar doesn't stretch as much as it used to. Disposable personal income continues to increase in the US, and health expenditures continually increase over time, even in times of recession, meaning that healthcare expenses are always going to be a necessity.
Great review, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll discuss the market trends to further extend our environmental assessment. The population age groups, the chart shows that the 65 and older age group has the most dramatic change. This indicates the global population is growing older. As healthcare availability has increased, people are living longer. The 65 and older age group is expected to double to 2 billion by 2060, while other age groups just kind of level off or only experience modest growth. So the 65 and older age group will just be an important area of focus because it will drive an increase in demand.
Yeah, this chart, if we look at it from, I don't know, to 1980 to 2020, does this chart have anything to say about the pharmaceutical industry's potential demand? The folks who are 45 and older tend to consume a lot more of the drugs than younger people do, and the 65 age group does. It looks like in the future that thing's going to drive consumption, but the 25 to 64 line suggests that the pharmaceutical industry already has sort of been supercharged. That's a pretty dramatic line, the green line. So population is stimulating demand for Pfizer's products.
So some of the health concerns of the adults 65 and older include some of these examples: hypertension, high cholesterol, arthritis, heart disease, diabetes. And many of those are the leading cases of death across the globe. So this will attract more attention with those aging populations, even after, there'll be a bigger attraction after COVID. COVID's obviously our major attraction.
Okay.
So another market trend that impacts this industry includes healthcare spending. We saw earlier from Elizabeth's slides that the healthcare spending is continuing to increase over time, even during the recession, which indicates the prevalence of healthcare across the globe. If we will look at total healthcare across the globe, the US is substantially higher than the other countries. This is due to the greater purchase power parity, and the US is being one of the wealthiest nations to be able to afford the high cost of healthcare and pharmaceuticals. The chart to the right shows the life expectancy compared to health expenditures. Typically, studies show how there's a positive association between health spending per capita and life expectancy, but the US is an outlier. Its spending is up, but its life expectancy is still behind other countries. This is due to other issues such as obesity and other health trends that are present here in the US. So with US being Pfizer's largest market, it will be important to focus on the specific needs, in the US, such as obesity and diabetes and other such diseases.
I'm sorry I flipped the slide on you like that. I thought you were ready.
That's okay.
No, I should be more careful.
So next is just another trend that is applicable to this market. It's the standardization of drug prices over this period of time. Drug prices have stabilized due to the regulatory pressures, and regulators kind of have the authority to change the demand structure through laws and regulations. This is important as pressures could substitute out branded products with generic products, which could hurt Pfizer in this case.
So Liz touched on this earlier in one of her slides about products, but Pfizer does have 6 different therapeutic areas. Internal medicine, which includes the metabolic and the cardiovascular disorder diseases, the inflammation and immunology area, oncology, rare diseases, vaccines, and the hospital products. And what this slide is showing is just a breakdown of the pipeline that Pfizer has in each of those areas. And as you can see, oncology has 31 total products in the pipeline. Elizabeth showed you the overall, but this kind of breaks it down by the therapeutic area. And this is just an indication based off of all of those different market indicators. We know that there's going to be a need with an aging population. Pfizer is working to meet that need. And this pipeline does include any new indications or enhancements which target those unmet medical needs and opportunities in the future for commercial growth. And it's an indication of investment into each of those business areas by development phase. So what's noticeable here is there is significant investment in the areas of oncology, vaccines, and inflammation and immunology based off of their pipeline right now.
That's a real good exhibit.
So this, I believe Katie might have shown something very similar in a previous slide. This is the sales trends by therapeutic area, and it shows the increase in sales by therapeutic area with the exception of inflammation and immunology. So each area increased last year with the exception of that one area. And of course, you see the stars there in vaccines. It's generated so much revenue. It shows in this chart as that it's not meaningful. However, I think Pfizer would disagree that it's not meaningful. It's very meaningful to them with the revenue that the vaccine area has produced for them in the last year. But overall, the revenues have increased 134% in the last year over all of these therapeutic areas.
Amazing.
And this slide is really just showing the key product revenue drivers in each therapeutic area. Elizabeth gave us a breakdown of the highest, but this breaks it down by therapeutic area as well. So Eliquis, it may be difficult to see with the slides. Eliquis is in the internal medicine therapeutic area. It's one of the top revenue generators within that area. Of course, COVID is in vaccine. The COVID vaccine is the greatest revenue generator right now. Vendamax is in the rare diseases, and all of the other drugs, with the exception of hospital products, are in the oncology sector. So that just goes to show you that 4 of these drugs that are listed out of the 8, so half of these drugs on this slide are within their oncology therapeutic area, which just indicates the importance of that therapeutic area. So, of course, we know the COVID trends are very important to Pfizer right now, and the company is looking at these trends worldwide. This slide, of course, it may not be current as of now. It was current as when we pulled it a few weeks ago, but I believe the trends are the same. This slide shows the total number of cases worldwide, and it's difficult to see with the colors, but U.S. is that top line. U.S. has the highest number of worldwide cases at about 19%, followed by India at about 13.5%, and Brazil at almost 9%. So those are the top 3 countries that have the, they're not winning the race right now. They have the highest COVID percentages.
Okay.
And then this slide shows the COVID trends by vaccinations. So not the number of vaccines that are given, but the number of vaccinations that are given. The United States falls right about in the middle of that graph at 67% of the population, the adult population vaccinated. Of course, this is not current as of today. This is current as of a few weeks ago. But how that percentage is calculated, they took the 57% that were fully vaccinated plus the 10% that were partially vaccinated. That all goes into the calculation for the number of vaccinations, which is, of course, what Pfizer is interested in based off of their products getting out to the patients. That top country up at 98% is United Arab Emirates.
This is a rather remarkable chart from the perspective of the United States, which is certainly not in the lead. And you can see occasionally a couple others that are interesting, such as Canada and Japan. Canada's our neighbor to the north, and it's got what, something like 79%, is it? You know, there are other developed countries that are doing better at vaccinations than the U.S. is. So it's interesting.
Exactly. And this is just a graphic that shows the vaccine projections for Pfizer's COVID vaccine. We haven't decided how to say the brand name, which is Comirnaty. We just call it we just call it the COVID vaccine. I've never heard in media the name of the brand at all. But the sales project, or the doses projected in 2022 are 4 billion, with 1.7 billion expected doses to be delivered based on the contracts that are already made as of now. So, and about 29 billion direct sales based off of those contracts that were signed as of mid-October. So we just know that Pfizer is going to continue to generate revenue from this vaccine, as we've seen in the previous slides. And what's interesting, this slide shows vaccine projections through 2026. And Pfizer vaccine is the light blue, Moderna vaccine is the dark blue, and the Novavax, which is not a vaccine we have here in the US, that's the light gray. This is the sales projections through the next 4 or 5 years. And as you see, Pfizer sales projections actually decline, and that is attributed to the downside of Pfizer's vaccine, because it needs ultra cold storage. And there are several countries and regions within the world that don't have that required cold storage, the logistics to support storing that vaccine. So that's why one of the reasons why the revenue is projected to decline over the next 5 years.
Sounds like a major reason.
It is. And so here again is a different slide that shows Pfizer's vaccine is in the yellow, Moderna's vaccine is in the blue. It just shows that, of course, Pfizer had first mover advantage over other competitors. And because of recent FDA approval of the third dose booster, as well as approval of the vaccine for children ages 5 to 11, it's just projected that Pfizer will continue to have a leading market position with their COVID vaccine.
Well,
We don't know yet about this new variant, how it's going to impact the new variant, but that was the current projections a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, but if I were to look closely at this chart, after 2022, I'm not sure that Pfizer has the leading market position, right?
And that's probably right. It looks like it levels off very, very similar equivalent to the Moderna vaccine after about 2022, 2023. Yeah.
An interesting comment to make about this slide is that vaccines, I suppose, when we have an epidemic or a pandemic, are in great demand during that epidemic, but then as the epidemic comes under control, the demand for that product goes down. So whether you're looking at Pfizer or Moderna, you're seeing declining demand over time, right? So if Pfizer is doing long-range planning, it needs to not concentrate exclusively on vaccines, but to continue to develop its core product lines.
Exactly. We hope that virus is eliminated soon. But so in line with that, what you just spoke about, Pfizer needs to focus on other product lines as well, knowing that the COVID vaccine may not be needed as much in the future. They're also looking toward the COVID treatment. So their current COVID treatment is Paxlovid, and it could be a game changer. That's going to be their oral antiviral candidate, which would reduce the risk of hospitalization and death. In the news today, if anybody's watched, Moderna's pill for this for COVID is actually going up for approval today or in this week. So I don't know if Pfizer is actually going to be the first mover in this product area, but it is expected that Paxlovid could gain some of the revenue that potentially the vaccine might lose in the future. And it is interesting that the company has invested $1 billion to start manufacturing this pill at risk. So they don't know that it's going to be approved, but the company is fairly confident in its approval pending coming. So they have invested quite a bit of money in this pill. But so we know about COVID trends, and we've talked about how the oncology therapeutic area is also the large area for Pfizer. This is just looking at those cancer trends in the United States and other illness areas that Pfizer treats. So the graph on the left, it shows the cost of care for cancer patients and how it's increased from 2010 in blue to 2020 in green, and that the 3 stages are at the initial stage, the continuing stage, and last stage of cancer that an individual has to go through. And then the graph on the right shows the prevalence of cancer through all ages in those phases as well. So the key takeaway here is that the prevalence and the cost of cancer and cancer treatment is going to increase. It has increased 30% since 2010, and it's going to continue to increase based off of the growth rate and the aging of the U.S. population. It's going to continue to drive that. So therefore, Pfizer needs to continue to offer their oncology products and continue with their pipeline of drugs in the oncology sector. And this slide shows cancer throughout the world. So the previous slide was just in the United States. This actually shows the prevalence of cancer throughout the world. That top bar is Asia, the second is Europe, and the third bar is North America. So in the next 20 years, the worldwide cancer prevalence is projected to increase by basically 50%. So there again, this just shows that the drugs to treat these cancers will be needed to meet this increase in the expected prevalence of cancer.
Just to be sure we're all together, these bars on this table correspond, right? So the blue would be
Correct.
2020, and the red tells us what to expect by 2040. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. We're recording, so I did that for posterity and the rest of the course, the rest of the class.
So this is another look at Pfizer's oncology division. It's just projected that their business is expected to continue to grow in the future based off of the patient needs. This is just a summary of the previous charts, and that their drugs are going to continue to be needed.
Okay.
Yep. So Katie, I don't know if you want to start this one out, or if you want me to go for it.
So there's just as an analysis of our market, there's a global transformation of the population age groups. The world population is growing older, so there will be a need for advanced medicines for the aging populations. Health expenditures are continue to grow, indicating a growing demand. Producer drug prices have stabilized, there's regulatory pressures in the environment. The prevalences of diseases, especially cancers, can be treated by Pfizer's drugs. But it's on the increase worldwide. And then Pfizer has many drugs in the pipeline that will fall within each of the 6 therapeutic areas, with oncology leading the number of potential new drugs. And although some countries have high percentage of COVID vaccinations, opportunities exist worldwide for greater vaccinations. Therefore, the increased need for COVID vaccine production.
For sure. Okay, off to industry structure, right?
Yeah, so here's a tabular comparison of Pfizer and its competitors, Novartis, Merck, and Glaxo. These are direct competitors because you can see with the sales that each of them have, roughly the same revenue volumes. Let's have similar shares in the market. The next slides will show a picture of graphs of all these numbers. So we'll review those next.
Oh, okay.
We can see that the pharma companies experience modest revenue gains in the sales chart in 2019 and 2020, but Pfizer's 2021 sales growth is expected to double. The other competitors don't have that market share because of the COVID vaccine. So as far as the operating margin over to the right, Pfizer operates at a higher operating margin than its competitors, indicating superior performance over its rivals, and can contain its costs of the industry's high R&D expenditures and efficiencies in its operations. So that is really good for Pfizer. We also want to point out GSK margins at 24.5 and 25, significantly lower than the other competition. So we'll review GSK a little bit more in the next slide, but just remember they have low margins.
Right? GlaxoSmithKline.
Yes.
Is GSK. Okay.
Yes. So we have ROI and ROE. Merck operates with the highest ORI and ROE in the gray. They produce the greatest margins with less debt and invested capital, giving them high returns. But their 50% leverage down below does indicate that they do have a little bit more risk than Pfizer and Novartis. We'll also, so talking about GlaxoSmithKline, it's low to moderate ROI and ROE, and it's 67% leverage down in the chart below in the yellow, and shows how highly leveraged with debt this company is and is operating with a lot of risk. If their volumes have a downturn, they may have a hard time paying off its obligations, especially with its already low operating margins.
Yeah.
This can be a weakness for GSK in the future.
I doubt that they have a hard time meeting their obligations, but when they do meet their obligations, they've got a lot less left to invest in development of new product and marketing and so forth. So when they're carrying this amount of debt, just imagine what would happen to GlaxoSmithKline if we had an increase from average midterm interest rates of say 4% to 6.5% or 7%, which is, we've certainly seen those rates and much higher in the past. But if interest rates go up, that's really going to choke GlaxoSmithKline, isn't it? Because it'll eat up more of their operating profit and leave less for Glaxo to invest in growth.
Right. So overall, for Pfizer, it generates healthy margins, produces above average ROI and ROE, and operates at a comfortable leverage with 37%. While this is a moderate level, we would typically not like to see that rate go any higher, but for now, Pfizer does operate at a very comfortable level.
Okay.
So as a summary, Pfizer will have significant gains on the COVID vaccine sales in 2021 above its immediate rivals. Its profit margins are the highest of the group, which indicates superior performance results. It produces good ROI and ROE with 17% and has a moderate amount of risk. We will point out that GSK is the weakest of the group again. And so to conclude, Pfizer is in a favorable financial position and has a positive outlook in its future.
I'm impressed by your wows.
So to talk about the market shares, the pharmaceutical market is roughly 1.27 trillion in 2020. So it's a huge market. The top 10 pharmaceutical companies make up roughly 1/3 of the world market. And each of the top companies have roughly equal market share across the pharmaceutical industry. I do want to point out that Johnson & Johnson and Roche revenues in this chart were adjusted to reflect only its pharmaceutical revenues. But they are much larger companies than Pfizer and Novartis and Merck, just because they have a little bit of a different makeup because they offer different products and devices besides just pharmaceuticals. But the pie chart is just the pharmaceutical markets.
Okay.
So, but overall, this chart shows us just how highly competitive this market is, with everyone have pretty equal market shares. So I think it's important to look at Pfizer's top 3 product lines and how it compares to its competitors. So first, we have the oncology products. Oncology is expected to grow from 177 billion in 2021 to 313 billion by 2026, with a continuous annual growth rate of 12.1%. That growth rate is absolutely phenomenal. It's huge. So in the chart to the right, Roche and Celgene, so they're indicated with the biggest circles on the map, have the largest market shares in oncology sales. but has had just minimal growth rate. Like you can see Roche, they may have only had 2% growth over the last 6 years. So Merck has had the largest growth with its blockbuster drug Keytruda that treats skin cancers. And then Pfizer in the middle of the chart have shown strong growth of 17%. That 17% is above the market's 12.1% growth rate. So this shows that Pfizer is definitely a viable player in capturing some of that growth in the oncology market. So next is the internal medicine products. Pfizer held 5% of the world's prescriptions in 2019, which is one of the highest, along with Roche and Novartis. But if you notice, it's predicted to forfeit 1.5% by 2026. This is due to the prescription market is just expected to become more balanced with decreasing gaps between the companies, because a company, AbbVie, is taking over some of the market share, the AbbVie is actually expected to be the market leader soon. So they have a drug, Humira, that is an anti-inflammatory medication that treats Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. So that's one of the biggest drugs on the market currently. So Pfizer really just needs to hold on to its position. Next was the vaccine product market. GSK has the largest shares in 2019. This is 2020. With Merck and Pfizer pretty well aligned at 17% each. This is prior to COVID. GSK, Pfizer, and Merck and Sanofi control 90% of the worldwide volume. And the total market is approximately 46.88 billion. And it's supposed to grow 9% each year through 2025. There's the market growth is primarily driven by the growing populations in India and China, and the increased demand for immunizations. So for 2021, the short-term growth in vaccines is obviously due to COVID. So we can see there's a little note in the bottom that says the Moderna didn't turn a profit prior to the COVID vaccine. So they just have a smaller share of the market. But we can see in the chart for the 3-year vaccine projection, Pfizer's revenue in 21 starts at 21.5 billion and then begins to taper off through 2023. And then we can see Moderna is expected to kind of remain high through 2023. So Pfizer, like Jennifer said, Pfizer has vaccine limitations because the vaccine has to be held at extremely cold temperatures. So there's certainly some room for improvement for Pfizer's vaccine if it wants to hold on to some of the COVID market shares.
Yeah, you kind of wonder whether Pfizer will revise its formula to produce a vaccine that does not require such intense refrigeration in order to sustain the sales of that product. If it has the ability to do that, it could really change the outlook. Apparently, this is the accepted wisdom that Pfizer's sales are going to go down because of this requirement for extreme refrigeration. But you've got to wonder what's going on in Pfizer's boardroom. They may want to see a change in this outlook.
To summarize, Pfizer is in a favorable position when it comes to market shares. It is a highly competitive market with Pfizer, Merck, GSK, and Novartis as its close rivals. Pfizer shows the most opportunity in the oncology market and has had strong growth, growing at 17% annually over the last 6 years. Pfizer, Roche, and Novartis are the largest players in internal medicine, but the market shares are expected to decline as the prescription market is becoming more balanced in a mature market. And Pfizer has a favorable position in the vaccine market, especially with the market shares from COVID. But like we mentioned, it might need to make some improvements to its drug limitations to gain back some market share.
For sure. Great summary.
So another aspect that is applicable to the industry structure is how Pfizer and other pharmaceutical companies choose their generic strategies and pricing in its distribution channel. Thus, we must kind of understand the dynamics of the pharma industry. First, a manufacturer sells a drug to a pharmacy benefit manager or a wholesaler. A wholesaler sells it to a pharmacy, and the pharmacy sells it to a patient. And where the patient only pays a minimal copay. So patients kind of focus on drug quality versus price because a patient pays that fixed copay no matter what the drug is. Customers focus on brands and quality of medicines, and if something works for them, they'll stick with that prescription no matter if there is a price increase. The insurers and the plan sponsors are the ones that pay the burden of the high price drugs. Thus, consumer demand is not really impacted by price increases. So for a strategy, Pfizer can create value through differentiation by producing high quality and innovative drugs. So this chart is just really just to display the pricing in the whole distribution channel.
I think it's a very effective chart because it indicates just how many places pricing decisions are made.
Okay, so this is the life cycle analysis specific to the pharmaceutical industry, which is holding steady in the mature stage. Some key indicators of that mature stage is there's high barriers to entry. So there's not a lot of new companies hopping into the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, there are companies that are consolidating with themselves, like, creating larger companies out of smaller companies. There's a focus on the profit maximization aspect, and there's low cost and differentiation needed at this stage. So the strategic objective at most companies is to balance their portfolio among all sections. So we mentioned earlier about products that are losing patents soon, and this chart specifically focuses in on those US patents. So there's several that are going to be going out of patent in the next few years, and once that patent expires, new entrants in the form of like generics will emerge into the market. So a focus that Pfizer and other pharmaceutical companies will have is to constantly introduce those new products as they get through the R&D pipeline to get those new products patented and in the market so that they continue to be leaders in that life cycle. The chart on the right shows some other products that are losing patents from the years 2025 to 2029. And there are several in there that are their large money makers right now. So of course, their focus is going to be on getting replacements of popular products into their market.
Good chart.
Here is a closer look at specific Pfizer products in the different stages of the life cycle. So some of their new products that have just hit the market or are coming up in the market are in that embryonic stage. The ones in growth have been, consumers have started to get involved in taking those products. In the shakeout is, where that patent expiration happens. There's shakeout with competitors. There's the biosimilars. Once they hit the mature stage, those are some of the most popular products for Pfizer. Those are established drugs in the market. There are not many competitors, and they have a very strong product reputation. And then in the decline, you can see a couple of drugs that have like generic options or over-the-counter options, or like in the case of Chantix, a recall, which is due to like side effects.
The suggestion of this chart without the numbers attached, the sales numbers, but the suggestion in this chart is that there's a pretty well-balanced portfolio. We've got products that are in early stages that have plenty of room to grow. We've got products that are mature or close to mature. They ought to be generating plenty of cash. And of course, we've got some that are on their way down. But it's impressive to see that Pfizer has abundant products at each stage, which suggests a balanced portfolio. And that's what we're looking for, is a balanced portfolio.
So this is just the general BCG matrix, the growth share matrix that has the 4 quadrants. And of course, the BCG matrix is a tool used to internally by companies to assess the current state of value of the firm's products. And it can aid the company in deciding which products to keep, which to sell, which to invest more in. And there are the 4 categories: the question mark or the new ventures, the stars, the cash cows, which are bringing in tons of revenue, and the dogs, which may be becoming more unstable or earning lower revenues. And then this aligns and translates from the life cycle matrix or analysis that Elizabeth just showed. If we'll go to the next slide, we can see a BCG analysis that's specific to Pfizer and their products. And of course, the objective is to have a balanced portfolio. And this is what we can see with this analysis as well. So in the question mark or the ventures portion of the matrix, we have the newer products or products that are in the pipeline. So Paxlovid, I think I might have typed that incorrectly, is the COVID pill. The Prevnar 20 is the newer version of the Prevnar 13 drugs that is coming up in the pipeline. Also, one of Pfizer's newer ventures is Cibinqo, which is an atopic dermatitis drug that has been recently approved. So those are in the growth stage. And if we look at where I put the COVID vaccine, is of course huge in comparison to the other drugs on this chart. And I kind of put it in 3 different categories, because if we look at it over this year, it probably has been in 3 different categories. So if you take it from the beginning of the year, it was a new venture. It was a question mark. They didn't know what was going to happen with it, but it has performed well. It got approved. It moved into the star category. Growth, the market growth grew, and of course it is a cash cow right now because it's bringing in all the revenue. So I had it in 3 different categories because if you look at it over its history within the last year, it could have probably fallen into those categories at some point in time over its brief history. But if we look more into the cash cows, if you remember some of those products that we talked about that were the key drivers of revenue, that's what's there in the cash cows. And that is some of those drugs that you saw in Elizabeth's life cycle analysis as well. So Inleta, Enbrel, Eliquis, the Prevnar family, those are falling into the cash cow area. But those dogs also showed up in the life cycle analysis and declined. Some of those, Sutent, which is declining demand, and it's losing its patent this year, or lost its patent in August of this year. Lipitor is declining demand, and Chantix had the recall and shipments were halted, and they're seeing declining sales there. So they're moving into the dog category based off this BCG analysis.
With all the analysis that we've seen of the cancer market and the rapid growth in demand for cancer drugs that we saw in the market analysis, I'm surprised that you don't have cancer drugs in the star category. Perhaps that's because Pfizer doesn't have dominant market shares, but are there any of those products down in the cash cow category that are cancer drugs? And maybe would be better placed in the star category. What do you think?
That is very possible. I believe Ibrance is one of those cancer drugs in LEDA. So yes, it could be up in the star category to make it more of a balanced portfolio. And Pfizer has such a large product portfolio too. We couldn't put everything here
Sure.
on this slide, of course. So, but yes, it definitely makes sense that they could be in the star category.
Mm-hmm. It just strikes me that we were impressed, or I was impressed by how well balanced that life cycle chart looked. And we know that the demand for cancer drugs is growing pretty rapidly. So I don't know. You might want to take a look at this and see whether we've got everything. Somebody's got their microphone on. Neil, turn your microphone off. Neil Siegler, turn your microphone off, please. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so then another analysis is Porter's 5 forces analysis, and this is just the generic model as well that shows the 5 forces, and then the graph on the left shows the added 6th force of the power of complement providers. But the original graph had 5. The original model had 5 different forces: the threat of new entry, buyer power, supplier power, threat of substitution, and of course, competitive rivalry within the industry. And strong competitive forces, of course, indicate a threat, and weak competitive forces indicate opportunities.
Right. And the
So
the strong forces are threatening is because each of those forces pushes profit in the industry down. They are profit suppressants.
So this slide actually applies Porter's 5 forces analysis to Pfizer directly. If we start in the middle, the competitive rivalry is high within the pharma industry. Of course, the demand for drugs is high, it's increasing. We've seen that. The industry cost conditions are high to establish pharma manufacturing and to obtain regulatory approval for drugs, and of course their investment in R&D. And the exit barriers are high because of the consumer need for products and the large investments and fixed costs within the industry. So competitive rivalry is high. The threat of new entry, I believe Katie's touched on this as well, is low. The Pfizer is in an established pharma industry, and it has a very large and differentiated product portfolio. There is brand loyalty, and switching costs can be high. So once a doctor prescribes a medicine, patients likely don't change to a different drug because of medical concerns. And also consumers are very loyal to quality generic drugs as well. So there is that low threat of new entry. As well, it's very difficult to join this industry and create scale economies just because of the needed investment for facilities and R&D and marketing to make a go at it. So low threat of new entry, but supplier bargaining power is moderate. And if we look at the pharma industry, the API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are used to make the drugs, Pfizer actually does have a supply. They are able to supply some of their API, but some of their raw materials may need to be sourced from other suppliers. They could have few suppliers, and any potential supply chain disruptions could increase supplier bargaining power. So overall, we determined that supplier bargaining power is moderate. If we look at buyer bargaining power, it's actually low, and this goes into the reasoning based off of the price of drugs as well. So consumers will buy their preferred or their prescribed drugs that are quality products regardless of the price. Katie touched on that. So the consumers are not experiencing those fluctuations in price based off because of medical insurance and the different payers that hopefully people have. And then there is low pressure to increase the quality of existing products because they're regulated anyway. These products have to be high quality to meet regulatory health authority standards to be on the market. So overall buyer bargaining power is low, and also the threat of substitution from a different industry is low. Now there could be innovations by other industries that could produce substitute products or chemicals or medicinal products or pharmaceuticals, but that is very unlikely to happen, that there would be a threat of substitution. And on the next slide,
boy, that was a long one. The best substitute is a witch doctor's potion.
So this is just a conclusion of Porter's 5 forces analysis. So the pharma industry is highly competitive, and Pfizer should just continue to invest in R&D for the innovation of their products and their processes to meet the current and future needs of their customers and to offset any generic any products that are facing generic competition. And then also to mitigate that moderate supplier buying or supplier bargaining power, Pfizer should continue to produce their own API or their raw materials, or find multiple suppliers that they could source those raw materials from. But overall, there is a very high profit potential for the pharma industry.
I think that's the bottom line too.
Exactly.
We see 3 forces that are not threatening, they're low. And supplier power is moderate because it could be high in some rare, some instances. But basically what we're looking at, 4 forces, 1, 2, 3, 4 forces are low. What are we, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You've got 6 in here.
I added, I think in this slide, I added in complement providers. I'm sorry, I didn't go over that. I added it in, it's low. I didn't have it in that previous slide.
Not a problem. You know, it's a competitive industry, but the forces that push profit down are not abundant. Basically, it's an industry that rewards science and research and development of product. And so when we saw the profit margins and the rates of return, but particularly the operating margins in an earlier slide, we saw some pretty high margins compared to other industries. And the pharmaceutical industry is regarded as a very profitable industry. It's possible to make real good money in this industry. And among other things, that's because the industry is so very important to you and me and our health and our well-being. So we're willing to pay for that.
So when we talk about critical success factors, you look at factors that can help an organization achieve their mission. And Pfizer's mission dates all the way back to Charles Pfizer himself, because in the very beginning, his vision was.
There she went again. Send her a.
Can you hear me?
Now we hear. Say it
again. Okay, I'll say it again.
Okay, so, you're back with us.
Okay, sorry. I think they've been working on our internet this week on our street. So Charles Pfizer's mission was to make the world a healthier place. And critical success factors are what drives an organization to complete this mission. So some of the critical success factors for Pfizer are new cardiology products, new oncology products, immunology products that are new, their global marketing, patents, the low leverage, contract lab partnerships, government relations, global and US, alliances with universities with molecular research capabilities, and research and development laboratories with specific capabilities such as molecular, organic, and chemical research.
Okay, these are critical success factors for sure. But what you said at the beginning was a little bit off target. Yes, I'm sure these are relevant to the mission, but we define critical success factors, and you learned this in Business 670, as capabilities, functional capabilities that distinguish winners from losers. For a company to be a successful competitor, it has to be excellent in these capabilities, or at least most of them. For instance, Pfizer focuses on oncology. It's pretty good in cardiology too, but a company wouldn't have to be excellent in all the different product categories, would it? But it'd have to be good at some, and so forth, the rest of these things. And if it's excellent in these critical success factors, these functional capabilities, then the chances are it's going to do better financially and competitively than its rivals. Okay? Just again, since we're recording, I want to make sure that everybody got that concept. Okay. Kate, it looks like we're up with Katie.
So just to conclude for our industry structure, the pharmaceutical industry, which Pfizer competes, is highly competitive and it's in the mature stage. Its top rivals are Novartis, Merck, and GSK. It has a favorable financial position and operates with minimal risk. Its industry life cycle is in the mature stage. Competition is high with minimal growth. Thus, focus on profit maximization and being a low-cost product differentiator is key for Pfizer. It has a balanced product portfolio, and its 4 or 5 forces reveal that it has high market potential. So critical success factors in this industry include quality, science, and technology with R&D and new product development, global marketing span, product patents, and efficient use of financial resources.
I'm going to fix this, but it probably, when you're in Zoom, I don't think that modifications change, but again, because of the 5 forces not being too scary, the industry has a high profit potential. Just a little housekeeping.
So we'll go into our capabilities analysis.
Okay.
So the building blocks of competitive advantage are efficiency, quality, innovation, and customer responsiveness. And Pfizer's.
There she goes. She's frozen. Her screen is frozen too.
Responsiveness
is it possible that one of you should pick up for Christina, because she's obviously going to keep having this internet problem?
I think she's back now. It looks like she's back.
Christina,
yes.
You lost us again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Customer responsiveness is a heavy emphasis on market research and development that allows Pfizer to continue to customize to the needs of its customers due to its increasing awareness of products.
New slide?
Next slide.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so now we'll go over a look at Pfizer's financial performance over the last 10 years. We can see in the chart for sales from 2011 to 2015, there was a really large decrease in sales and operating margins due to the volumes related to its Lipitor drug. Its patent protection dropped off in 2011, and it lost $4.8 billion in sales in that year, and has continued to see a decrease. So we can see even on the operating margin chart that margins also decreased from 2013 to 2016 because of the loss of the patent that rolled off, and it caused fixed costs not to be spread across as many product sales. We can see in the ROE chart in 2019, 25% decrease in 2020 to 10% because of the COVID impacts. But prior to the decline, Pfizer was really on a steady incline, providing efficient return on equity. Pfizer's continued increase in ROI indicates its ability to manage its finances and handle its company assets appropriately. So 17% is really good for investors. So there's again a drop in 2020 due to COVID, but it's expected to go back up.
Katie seems to have taken on a very complicated problem. Look at the variation in these charts. That's to analyze this as a chore and a half.
So Pfizer's long-term debt has steadily increased for acquisitions and investments and operations. And in 2021, it is expected to pay off its existing debt from proceeds from when it spun off Upjohn. Shareholders' equity had a steep decline, again, due to that patent roll-off that from Lipitor. Pfizer's leverage has steadily increased, but at a moderate rate. It has stayed at a reasonable rate under 37%. Leverage is projected to decline due to its favorable impacts from COVID vaccine introduction as shareholders' equity increases.
Right. And equity will increase because of the added profit from vaccine sales, among other things, right?
Yes.
It's interesting. I don't know whether we've covered it before or not, but debt comes down from the sale of Upjohn, and I believe Pfizer has also divested other consumer products. Right? It's not focusing on consumer products as it has in the past. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah, it spun off its consumer.
Okay.
So just in summary, Pfizer has seen a steady decline in sales from 2011 to 2020 due to the loss of patents, thus indicating how highly dependent sales are on its exclusivity rights. Its biggest loss was due to the Lipitor patent roll-off. It was the largest drug in the world at that time, before 2011, and its product pipeline introductions at the time just weren't ready to lose its exclusivity. Operating margins are highly sensitive due to the break-even effect. Pharmaceuticals have a very high fixed cost, and if a patent drops off, demand drops, and fixed costs are not able to be spread over large product volumes. So it's highly responsive to volume fluctuations. Return on investment and return on equity have increased at a favorable rates over time, and its ROE has indicated Pfizer's willingness and effectiveness to use debt to finance its assets and provide healthy returns. Its leverage has steadily increased and has stayed at a moderate rate under 37%. So in conclusion, Pfizer has reduced sales trends due to product life variations, but has continued to deliver high operating margins by focusing on its cost structure. Operating margins are sensitive, but the company has provided investors with positive returns and has maintained a favorable position with the capability of utilizing its financial resources to continue driving growth.
All right, so for marketing methodology, prescription drugs are usually marketed directly to healthcare providers and managed care organizations, and then the over-the-counter are marketed directly to the general consumers. So direct-to-consumer advertising in the U.S. For prescription drugs encourages consumers to ask their doctors about the drugs ads can communicate the uses, benefits, and risks. I'm sure anytime you see a commercial for a prescription drug, there's like all the little sign language, but that's the fastest way to get the information out to the people. And then those direct-to-consumer ads are not really allowed in other countries. There's only 2 countries that allow those direct ads, and that's us and New Zealand. General advertising is also used for disease awareness, prevention, wellness, and patient assistance programs. So for pharma industry marketing, this expenditure pie chart is from 2012. The study that did this, that collected this data, hasn't done an updated study since 2012. But even though it's a little out of date, it does show a great trend in how pharmaceuticals are marketed. So detailing is the largest, and that's the face-to-face sales reps that visit, healthcare providers. And then they also usually will provide that healthcare provider with samples to give to their patients to try out the products. Pharmaceutical companies spend most of their money on that detailing and samples for consumers. And part of the detailer's job is to share information with the healthcare providers about the product uses, benefits, adverse effects. And then that healthcare provider will provide that information to their patients.
Okay. Incidentally, I'm sensitive to the fact that you guys have this, what you call a hard stop at 8 p.m. That's 45 minutes from now. So where you have a graphic, I don't really know how many more slides we have, but I think it's a fair number. So I suspect that where we have a graphic exhibit, and you can indicate what the topic is, but maybe not the details, that could be a way to save a little time.
Okay, well, here's the distribution channels. This is manufacturing down for pharmaceuticals, over-the-counter, and vaccines. Obviously, those are the 3 primary distribution channels, and wholesalers are a very important part of this because they distribute it out to the masses.
Okay.
These are the top 3 wholesalers that Pfizer uses, and there's some information there about the percentage of total revenue amongst those top 3 wholesalers. Media advertising, we probably don't really have to go over this too much. We all know what media advertising looks like, direct to consumer and through healthcare providers, as previously mentioned.
That's it? Flip the slide? Okay.
There's more important stuff down the line than marketing information,
Okay,
so we can move on. So direct to consumer spending, you can see the trend is that it's increasing. And then for the top 10 ad spenders for big pharma in 2020, 2 of those products were Pfizer products. And here again, our leading pharmaceutical products, these are the blockbuster drugs on the market. Pfizer's Eliquis is 4th most in spending for pharma products in 2020. And this chart does not account for any of the COVID-19 products.
Right.
These are the projected top 10 products in lifetime sales as of 2024. And you can see Lipitor and Enbrel are 2 Pfizer products that are amongst these top 10.
These are products made not just by Pfizer, but by everybody, right?
That's correct. These are all the products in the pharmacy
industry. And so we see Pfizer with 2 of the top 3.
Yes, of the top 10, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so now we'll take a look at Pfizer's product in R&D. So this is just a slide showing their global sites for production. And Pfizer does have, it's an old company. It's over 170 years old. They've got lots of experience. They invest over $1 billion annually in their manufacturing sites. And there are, this slide says more than 35 across 6 continents. The next slide actually shows that there's more than 42. But from those facilities, they're delivering their medicines, their research and development. This is an overview of the production sites. So here it says there's 42 manufacturing sites in the global Pfizer Biopharm group, and they supply over 125 countries. The U.S. manufacturing sites is really interesting. They've got sites in Massachusetts, Ohio, Michigan, Kansas, Wisconsin, New York, the 2 in North Carolina, Rocky Mount and Sanford, which they are very different sites in North Carolina. They do different things, and of course, St. Louis, Missouri. And then some of their highlights are just that the Kalamazoo, Michigan site is the largest manufacturing site in the world. It has over 90 acres, and they produce API as well as intermediates from that site. Freiburg, Germany produces tablets and capsules. And in Ireland, that is the home of Pfizer's Technology Innovation Center. And in Ascoli, Italy, they have the capabilities at that site to go from product and process development at the lab and pilot scale all the way up to commercial manufacturing scale. So this just shows that these sites have a breadth of experience and product capabilities at the different sites. The next slide will show the different production capabilities that the company has. They can do small molecule API manufacturing, large molecule biologics, oral solid dose, that's your tablets, your capsules, your coatings, your blendings, and sterile injectables. Those are your vaccines. Those are vials, cartridges, IV bags, prefilled syringes, and surgical devices. And so this is just a look at some of the R&D sites in the world, and all except one are within the United States, and that one is in the UK, which is the home of the Pharmaceutical Science and Global Regulatory Affairs groups. And at one time, that's where the Pfizer Upjohn group was located as well, but the main R&D sites in the U.S. are in Massachusetts, Boulder, Colorado, which is interesting. That was an acquired company in 2019. Cambridge, Massachusetts, Groton, Connecticut evidently has its hand in all sorts of R&D. Almost every product goes through Groton at some point in its development. Pearl River, New York is the oldest site. It's been in operation since 1907, and that's where vaccines are primarily researched and developed at that site. And then St. Louis, Missouri, I think is a kind of catch-all site. They can do R&D and manufacturing there.
I think you skipped over La Jolla.
Oh yes, California. I'm sorry.
Looks
so
like an
that's
important location, just because
that is a very important location because
the 2 most important product lines, right?
yes, oncology and vaccines. Yes, thank you for
Yeah.
pointing that out.
Okay.
That is very important. But looking at Pfizer's R&D capabilities, of course, science holds the cure for Pfizer, because what is in development is what's going to be on their product line in the future. And different areas that they're focusing on are gene therapy. And that's where that manufacturing facility in Sanford, North Carolina, is where the gene therapy drugs are being made. Precision medicine is an emerging area, and that includes having therapies that are tailored to individuals using biomarkers, phenotyping, digital tech, genetics, all big data. This all goes over my head, so I'm very grateful that there are knowledgeable people at Pfizer who know how to do this and are working with this. The medicinal science group is looking at different things in next generation of science technology to create innovative therapies. And then biosimilars, we've probably heard about those. Those are products that are very similar to drugs that are already approved and authorized, and they are large molecule products. and they're often lower cost.
Are we
So
done?
taking a look, yes, we are. Thank you.
I'm
So
sorry.
if we move on to the organization, the people, we can just do this very high level. So this is the executive leadership team currently. Albert Bourla is the current chairman of the board of directors and the CEO. I actually saw him on TV yesterday making a comment about the Pfizer vaccine. But you see here, he's got a diverse executive team. And then there are also, in the next couple of slides, we have scientific leaders. Yep. So this is the medicinal science researchers. There are 6 senior or director level scientists within this group, and I highlighted Carolyn Leverett, who is a North Carolina native and an NC State grad for all of us who want to celebrate the home state. She is featured on Pfizer's experts, but this just goes to show it takes very experienced, very knowledgeable people to work in R&D to develop these drugs. Also, we've got the scientific leaders from the other therapeutic areas of cardiovascular, metabolic diseases, medicine and hospital products, immunology, inflammation, and oncology. I think what's interesting here, of course, there's lots of PhDs, lots of MDs who are leading these R&D efforts within the company, but I think it's interesting that oncology, which is one of course, the larger therapeutic area in Pfizer, only has 2 chief science officers, whereas some of these other therapeutic areas have more science officers. In the next slide, we'll see
don't forget your favorite though, Dr. Leverett. See, she's a principal scientist in oncology, so she got her due there.
Exactly. So on the next slide is the group of lead scientists for the vaccines and rare diseases group. So vaccine group is comprised of 1,500 global colleagues. And of course, they partner with different agencies. They partner with government, civic organizations, and other groups within the biopharm industry to work on these new drugs and new therapies. And Kathleen Jansen there in the middle, she has a star because she was the lead researcher for the COVID vaccine. So a lot of people are very thankful and grateful for her. Pfizer is most definitely, I'm sure. And rare diseases has several lead scientists too, because that is lots of research is going on there, and they probably have people focused in different areas of rare diseases, including neurology, cardiology, nephrology, pulmonology, different areas. So they need several scientists there. And of course, it's not just the executives and the scientists who are driving the company, it's the people in general. So that's what this slide is about, just that Pfizer has a lot of very good, diverse talent, and they want their talent to be able to develop, grow, and succeed in an engaging workforce. And so they have different programs in place to work towards that.
Oh, we've lost her again.
No, I think she's just on mute right now. Christina, I think you're on mute.
There we go.
Am I unmuted?
Now you're okay.
Am I? Okay. I switched to my sound to help on the internet situation. So are we good? Okay. So as a team, we got together to come up with their scorecard, and we looked at their success factors, such as cardiology and oncology and immunology, neurology, vaccines, their global marketing, their patents, their leverage. And we compared them to their competitors, GlaxoSmith, Merck, and Novartis, and 1 being at the bottom and 5 being the highest. And we used numbers such as like the patents or the number of US protected. So when you go to the patents, Pfizer they were low in their number of protected, and I'm trying to remember, and I want to think it was like 32 that they had. So when we compared them to Novartis, Novartis actually had highest. So that was how we kind of come up with the score that we gave them for each section.
It won't advance for me. Sorry. Let me try to fix
You're
it.
fine.
Doggone it.
I'm just worried it's an issue on my end all of a sudden.
The thing is we've just got more technical problems today than we can deal with. Okay, there we go.
And so just a quick overview on their SWOT analysis. Some of their strengths are their research and development, of course, the COVID-19 response. They have a robust financial position, and they're creating innovative products. Some of their weaknesses were the vaccine accessibility, such as the cold storage, the effectivity, sometimes a negative brand image, and that can happen to any company just because of lawsuits. There's a limited scope for market share. Some of the opportunities are agreements with other pharmaceutical companies, increasing awareness about healthcare needs, new markets such as obesity and diabetes research and development. Some of the threats or problems, as we prefer to say, would be that the vaccine patent infringement allegations, the patent expirations, vaccine supply issues, new product failures, and the stringent regulatory environment that can challenge global operations. And just a quick analysis summary on their capabilities. To stay abreast of competition, Pfizer continues to meet and exceed customer needs while producing quality products through research and development. The focus on research and development allows Pfizer to achieve financial performance. To meet these needs and continue to show economic growth, Pfizer continues to foster employee commitment and create a distinctive competitive advantage.
So we'll go into our goals. So here we have the goals hierarchy, which is a visual representation of how of Pfizer's goals and how its goals should be prioritized. If we start from the bottom, Pfizer has an acceptable level of risk at 37%. Next, it's superior financial results. Pfizer has superior profit margins over its competition, which reflects superior performance and cost containment of its R&D expenditures. It generates healthy ROI of 17%, which is really good for any return, and ROE of 25.5%. So next, the favorable market position. Pfizer is in the top 10 pharmaceutical companies and has established products and patents. It is really well positioned in its market, but the market is still highly competitive and growing very, very quickly. So we would, and then the long-term growth, Pfizer currently has not struggled with this long-term growth, but it's been minimal growth in the market over the last 10 years. But it focuses on its unmet needs in oncology, cardiovascular diseases, vaccinations, and rare diseases. So while Pfizer is in a top market position, its market is still highly competitive and is continually growing. So Pfizer needs to focus on advancement in R&D capabilities and gain market shares in specific product lines to secure their long-term growth. So we would really have them in the stage of securing their favorable market position.
It's got 1 foot in each puddle.
Yeah, and so, but we also want to point out as they increase their market position and maybe take on new acquisitions to grow that position, we kind of want to make sure that they are still focusing on their acceptable risk and not going any higher than it already is.
Very good, very good. Rather an interesting situation. You could you got to be impressed by Pfizer's need to press its favorable market position and improve its market positions, but it also has to put a priority on long-term growth. In those areas you've identified, so it's kind of a double challenge here. It makes it a little unique situation and very challenging.
So here's the financial goals table. We can see that sales are to increase 46% from 2020 to 2025. It's projected to double in 2021. So it's circled there at 80 billion, but it's expected to come back down to 61 billion by 2025. So this is a large growth, but seems reasonable with the products in Pfizer's pipeline and expected growth in specific markets like oncology. The operating margin is expected to increase up to 50% with the new pipeline introduction, which is truly remarkable. 50% margins are really high for any industry. ROI to increase back up to 17%. It was down to 7.7% in 2020, but we have to remember the impacts from COVID. So getting back up to 17% is really good. Long-term debt is expected to decrease by 19%, down to 30 billion. This is good considering its leverage was creeping up over the last 10 years. So its goal to have leverage at 27.5% is a really reasonable goal for Pfizer.
Good chart.
We seem blurry. Here are the financial trend projections, just what we just looked at. We can see the large increase in sales in 2021 because of the COVID, to come back down in 2025. This is still a good growth for Pfizer. You can see how the 61 billion is the largest it's seen over the past decade since its Lipitor patent. So I'm sure shareholders are excited to see their volumes back up. So operating margin is expected to go up to 50% as new products are launched. ROI is expected to remain at 17% after the dip from COVID. And ROE is expected to come back up to in 2021, rebounding after COVID as well. And then long-term debt is expected to decrease slightly. We can see how Pfizer has stabilized its debt over a long period of time. Shareholders' equity is expected to skyrocket up until 2025. This will be the highest stockholder equity Pfizer has seen over the past decade since the decline from Lipitor. So, and its leverage is expected to decrease to 27%, which is really good.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to see leverage get a whole lot lower because, at this level of leverage, where it's nice and comfortable, and with their high rates of return on invested capital, what was the return on investment? Something like 17%. So if I can borrow, maybe issue bonds at 4% and get a return on the investment that I get from those bonds of 17%, that's a pretty good deal, right? You borrow at 4%, pay back the bank the 4%, and keep the remaining 13%. So that's why leverage can be used effectively to create a sizable difference between return on investment and return on equity. And we can see that Pfizer's return on investment, when things get better, about 17%, but the return on equity, 25%. But it goes down a bit because, among other things, we've got less leverage. We're not investing as much capital. So although it's good to avoid excessive leverage, it's not good to not make use of debt when your financial condition is strong.
Yeah. So the competitive position goals, like we talked in the goals hierarchy. So Pfizer should focus on the expansion of its oncology drug market share. The market is growing fast at a continual annual growth rate of 12% and offers a large growth potential. Currently, it possesses 5.3% of the share, but it's in the top 4 worldwide companies. So in 2021, it had 21% growth in oncology. So it's certainly growing faster than the combined market. So this is a large growth potential for Pfizer. It should also focus on the COVID vaccine market share and overcome vaccine storage limitations. 2021 offers some amazing returns for COVID vaccines, but with its revenues tapering off into 2023, it could make improvements on its cold storage requirements to gain some of that market share back from Moderna. Right. Next slide. It should also expand new products to meet the aging population demands, where it will emphasize on molecular, organic, chemical research capabilities to focus on oncology, inflammation, vaccines, rare diseases, and internal medicines, and meet the unmet needs for cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and obesity trends. It should mitigate increased competition threats and hold on to its top market share in the internal medicines and continue to be a key player for heart and diabetes treatments. Okay. And then we would also focus on product treatments for rare diseases. Gene therapy breakthroughs can really change patient lives that are living with rare genetic diseases. There's a high unmet need for limited populations living with lifelong diseases. So there's a new markets can be created that require Pfizer's differentiated products. We want to point out that rare diseases create a really unique opportunity for research. Once a drug is developed, since competition is limited due to the limited population size of those rare diseases, so product line revenues are essentially protected under patents and limited competition.
Thank you, Katie. Good point. I'm trying to advance the slide. Darn it. There we go.
So to conclude, Pfizer has a strong financial position and operates with an acceptable level of financial risk. Sales over the 5-year term spike in the short term due to COVID vaccine volumes, but decreased back down to $60 billion by the end of 2025. $60 billion will still be at the highest sales projections the company has seen over the last decade since its leading drug Lipitor. So we know Pfizer has to be ecstatic for this growth in the near term. There is excellent growth in the market to produce healthy operating margins and return on investment and return on equity. It possesses a strong market position in the top 10 pharmaceutical companies, but the market remains highly competitive and is growing quickly. Thus, it must continue to invest on sustaining its market position.
So if we move into the strategy, just looking at the generic objectives, Pfizer has a focused differentiation strategy. They're differentiated because they have such a large number of unique and high quality products that are offered in many categories to a broad population. They have OTC and prescription drugs, of course, oncology, inflammation, vaccines, and rare disease drugs, but they are also focused because there are certain products that are marketed to those certain segments of the population. So, of course, cancer drugs, or for cancer patients, rare disease products are marketed and produced for those specific patients. So overall, a generic objective of focused differentiation.
For sure.
And so some of the capabilities and resource development, of course, Pfizer is a biopharmaceutical company that is focused on breakthroughs that change patients' lives. That goes right back to the vision and the mission that we stated at the beginning of the presentation. And how they get to that point is through their R&D, their company history that has provided broad expertise and their talent, their technical competences, their manufacturing abilities, which include the scalability, the agility, and the efficiency of those manufacturing processes. Of course, their quality systems, which would include their international regulatory affairs processes that they have in place. Of course, their marketing and distribution channels, the need to collaborate and create partnerships for innovation, and of course, their company leadership and the talent within all of their different areas. So an interesting quote from Albert Bourla, the CEO, and he's only been in office in his position since January of 2019. He's led the company through many acquisitions in that time, the spinoff of Upjohn. He stated that we will find so many other advances in the other fields, which will help us greatly as we strive to achieve the target we've set of bringing 25 breakthroughs by 2025. So definitely a company that is focused on breakthroughs and R&D and innovation. So if we look at integration through industries, vertical integration, just a little snippet, food for thought. To manufacture a single vaccine dose, it can take 400 raw materials, 581 manufacturing steps, 678 different quality tests, 1,700 colleagues over 2.5 years. And Pfizer looks at integrating through other industries outside of their core business, but to strengthen their core business. And the reasons that they would do that would be to encourage rapid growth, to enable direct quality control through every stage of production in the value chain, and it also facilitates control over what their customers are getting in the customer experience. So just in the next slide, an example of vertical integration would be for forward vertical integration. There is a site in Saudi Arabia that is actually able to manufacture, sell, and distribute products from that one site. So they're moving forward into the supply chain in vertical integration, and moving backward in vertical integration. Pfizer has actually partnered with Corning and Merck to create a Corning Valor glass, which is a superior glass vial product that can sustain more damage or more disruption through shipping, and it just holds up better. It's a better quality. So that is a primary packaging material that's used in the drugs, and as part of the pharma industry, there's a lot of emphasis on having good quality glass. So I think that's a really good example of a backward vertical integration. For horizontal integration, this is not an up-to-date graphic, but it is a great graphic that shows the mergers and acquisitions within the industry and its competitors, and all the different companies that have merged to become what is now Pfizer. Of course, now Pfizer has spun off Upjohn, but there are advantages of merging with other companies through horizontal integration. Reduced competition, you can have larger economies of scale, you might have better brand image or can transfer your positive brand image to other products or other markets. It streamlines the company, hopefully creating better channels, and of course you diversify your portfolio. The next slide shows an example of horizontal integration and potential outlooks, but the current CEO is definitely saying, yes, you should expect to see Pfizer make more acquisitions of smaller companies. And there are potential acquisitions that the company can look at, smaller companies out there that are available for mergers and available for acquisitions in the different therapeutic groups. The next slide talks about related diversification. So this is a corporate level strategy based off of establishing a business unit in a related industry. And what Pfizer makes use of, because pharma drugs is the core business, they actually do have related diversification in that they have a related business in their active pharmaceutical ingredient business called Pfizer Center One. And there are just different competencies within that industry that translate well into the core industry as well. Pfizer does not use unrelated diversification. That would form conglomerates, and the CEO has said, no, they don't want to be a company that creates larger conglomerates. They're going to be a company that focuses on science rather than forming those large conglomerates.
Good.
The next slide, we'll talk about alliances and joint ventures. And one of Pfizer's strategies is innovation through collaboration. And of course, they have multiple collaborations with multiple different industries, with different groups, science collaborations through academia, healthcare, government, other biopharm industry groups. Data collaborations are pulling a lot of data from different areas. There's a partnership with a company called DataSphere where they're gathering information that can help them learn more about patients, learn more about diseases, and know how to develop drugs that can help in those areas. And of course, that goes into technology as well.
According to your limitations, we have 10 minutes left.
Okay, we're flying through.
Okay.
The next slide is just an example of some of those joint ventures and alliances. They aligned or had a joint venture with GSK to form an OTC business. And of course, we all know about the Pfizer-BioNTech joint venture to create the COVID vaccine. It was interesting that BioNTech brought the R&D portion of many different vaccine candidates. Pfizer continued the R&D and upscaled the manufacturing part of it. So that is a truly great joint venture. The next slide shows 58 different companies that Pfizer is currently working with in an active international portfolio.
Boy,
so lots going on with the company.
That's impressive.
All right, so we'll touch briefly on the NSOF's growth matrix. If we go to the next slide, we'll look at the first section of that matrix, which is market penetration. And this is increased sales with existing products in an existing market. This is low risk because it's an existing market with existing products. An example for Pfizer specifically is Nexium becoming over the counter, having a marketing campaign to push that product over the counter availability, and it becoming more available to its customers at a retail setting.
Be right back.
Okay, I'll continue to talk about it. So as you can see from the graph, I'll just talk about the graph in general. The risk increases as you go to the right and then also down. So market penetration is the lowest risk area. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about product development and market development, which are medium risk. And the highest risk area is going to be diversification. For market penetration, we talked about Nexium, but also other generics that are created or biosimilars and over-the-counter products. Taking these into foreign countries, for example, we have a lot of products that are available in the US that aren't necessarily available in other parts of the world. So market penetration could look in the form of taking those products that are existing here and are used in our market and taking those to a foreign country and connecting those products with people in other areas.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
You want the
Okay.
slide advanced?
Yes, please.
Next slide. Okay.
So for product development, this is one of those medium risk areas I just mentioned, and this is taking a new product to an existing customer base, and this is where we focus on innovation and R&D. Some examples of this are research and development focused on products to treat growing ailments, what we've discussed earlier, such as cancer, arthritis, and obesity. And this is probably the area that Pfizer spends a lot of their efforts in. Market development is taking current products or services to new markets or customer groups. This is finding new markets and knowing how those products can meet the local needs and figuring out where they're appropriate to be introduced. An example would be expanding the COVID-19 product availability into other countries. Examples could be Brazil, India, and Australia that recently began, distributing the Pfizer vaccine.
Oh, okay.
Next. For diversification, this is the most risky and difficult because you have to understand those new markets and the development of the products that are valuable to those markets. An example, which is hypothetical, is that Pfizer would launch a line of gym or fitness equipment. This would be a lot of new research, a lot of new market understanding. And an example actually for Pfizer is the Zoetis Animal Science Division and the Nutritional Division that they abandoned in 2012.
I think the example of gym equipment is pretty far-fetched, but Zoetis is not, right? It was a diversification, divested, but a very reasonable diversification.
Mm-hmm. So just to summarize, Pfizer uses the focus differentiation strategy. There are a lot of alliances and joint ventures, and there are 4 approaches to growth that are essential.
Okay.
Sorry, for implementation priorities, it's a lot, but we'll just touch on it really quickly. Collaboration and co-promotion. And if you're not familiar with co-promotion, it's an agreement to promote a product under the same brand name and price with a single market strategy. The use of collaboration and co-promotion enhance research and development and distribution of certain biopharmaceutical products. And there is a list of drugs that they actually have collaborated and co-promoted with other companies, and there's a breakdown of how they kind of devised how the money or funds were going to be shared among the companies. In research and development, we go back to their pipeline. They deliver a pipeline of highly differentiated medicines and vaccines where Pfizer has a unique opportunity to bring the most important new therapies to patients in need. Again, going back in November, there were 94 projects in various stages. Of these phases, 6 are anti-infective, 17 are vaccines, 12 are rare disease, 31 are oncology, 12 are internal medicine, and 16 are inflammation and immunology. New skills and abilities. They have a partnership with Cambridge University that focuses on cardiovascular disease. They have a partnership with the University of Texas Southwestern.
Hello?
The slide moved. Okay, so they have a partnership with Texas Southwestern that focuses on genetic targets for specific indications, particularly in oncology and metabolic disease. They have a partnership with
I'm sorry, we were on this slide, right? And then did we go here?
We're here now, yes.
Okay.
I just kept going. They have, in January of 2021, there was a partnership with Amazon and Pfizer and AstraZeneca, Merck, and Teva to build a new lab, which is considered a health-oriented technology innovation project in Israel. And this was to create and invest in startups that were specializing in personalized treatments and solutions. They have a $10 million operating budget that's going to go over a span of 5 years. And then in March of 2021 in Portage, Michigan, that is going to be the new home of a new pharmaceutical production facility.
It went too far. I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine.
Well, it's not. The system's not working properly. There we are.
It just goes with our side of technology issues. So Jennifer put together the Pfizer organization structure, the current. So it has our current CEO and chairman. And this is, yeah. So this just breaks down everything that is current.
Okay, normally what we do is, and I won't prolong the discussion here, but what we want to do is ask whether the organization is structured so that the strategy can be implemented successfully. So if we look at this, we see the biopharmaceuticals group, the digital and CTO, that looks like technical support. We move over to R&D and science, and we appear to see some of the basic laboratory capabilities. I'm not, and we see all sorts of support functions. It's not altogether clear just where the various product groups are, but that would be a question that we would want to get into if we had time.
The organization, as mentioned earlier, has 42 manufacturing sites globally, 10 in the U.S., 8 research and development sites with 7 located in the U.S. and 1 in the Ukraine, and they have 25,000 clinical researchers. In 2019, they named their new CEO, Albert Bourla. They brought on 3 new directors named to the board in 2020. And in August of 2021, Amir Malik was named Executive Vice President and Chief Business Innovation Officer. And to summarize, while the key driver in their current financial growth is the COVID-19 vaccine, Pfizer must look forward and continue to research and develop products to meet customer needs. Opportunities to provide innovation first and fast while focusing on areas of strong growth will be a key success for market growth and stability.
I think, is that it? Are we at the end?
That is it.
That was it.
Wow.
But if you were to go back to the organizational structure, we had talked about Pfizer was so focused on collaboration and R&D that potentially we agreed with the current organizational structure the way it was, especially their CEO, who has done a fantastic job in his 3 years in his position. But potentially we could add a division or an executive who could oversee the collaboration of all of these potential acquisitions or potential innovators who they collaborate with and have ventures with.
Okay, well, you said you have a hard break at 8 o'clock, and I want to respect that. Congratulations, you got it done by 8 o'clock, and that was after a rather lengthy technical delay, which was my fault. So I'm very sorry.
I had some too.
What?
I had some difficulties too.
Well, now we have that in common. We have something in common, Christina. you and I. Okay. All right, ladies. Happy holidays. Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Merry Christmas and have a nice
Merry Christmas.
holiday. Bye-bye.